thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this foolhardily scandalous thing. 13. And how could I rid myself of my shame? And you will be considered one of the stupid fools in Israel. Now therefore I pray you, speak to the king, for he will not withhold me from you. She is begging her brother, don't make me do this. I am a virgin. I am saving myself for my husband. And back then, of course, it should be that way today, but it's not. But back then, that was an ultimate thing to be a virgin and never been with a man. It was an honor.
Yes.
And yet, he wanted to come and take that from her. But he would not listen to her, and being stronger than she, he forced her and laid with her. There's your action. Now, 15. Then Ammon hated her exceedingly, so that his hatred for her was greater than the love with which he had loved her. And Ammon said to her, get up and get out. But she said, no, this great evil of sending me away is worse than what you did to me. But he would not listen to her. He called for his servant and said, put this woman out of my presence now and bolt the door after her. So he's basically raped her, and now he's throwing her in the street.
Wow.
Y'all think she was hurt?
Yes.
You think she was broken? Now Tamar was wearing a long robe with sleeves of various colors. These robes were worn by the daughters, and this was Ammon's servant brought her out and bolted the door. It says, and she put ashes on her head, tore the long sleeve robe which she wore, and she laid her hand on her head and went away shrieking and wailing. So this robe that she had on of many colors was a sign of her virginity to everyone else. So she actually had to tear this robe off of her, humiliated, shamed, and she had done nothing wrong. 20. And Absalom, her brother, said to her, has your brother Ammon been with you? Be quiet now, my sister. He is your brother. Take not this matter to heart. So Tamar dwelt in her brother's house, a desolate woman. He said, shh, be quiet, Tamar. Desolate means very sad and lonely. No joy, very sorrowful. A barren woman. Every woman back then wanted to have children. But if she's not around anybody, lifeless and alone. Tamar was wounded. Tamar, her purity was taken from her. Then, whenever she turned around and said, okay, well, he's done this thing to me, he kicks her out. I can't even imagine. And after he kicks her out, she has to rip off her clothes so that everybody knows that her virginity is gone.
Yes.
How many times in our lives have people done things to us that caused us shame, that caused us to be wounded? How many times was it that we just wanted to lay down and be joyless. That we wanted to lay down and be sad and be lonely. Because when something is taken from you like that, only God can restore that.
Yes.
And see, in Tamar's case, they told her to be quiet. I'm going to tell y'all a little story. My daughter at 14 years old was raped. And she asked me to be quiet. She said, Mom, I was with a bunch of kids and we were all drinking and stuff and all of that. And she said, please don't cause a problem. She was 14. This man was 21 years old. But see, I was out in the world at that time doing my drugs and playing my games. And I got so angry with God and I said, how dare you? He said, you need to back up. He said, I didn't do it. But if you'd have been the parent you should have been, and if you'd have been on your face for your daughter like your mother and dad were on their face for you, she wouldn't have been where she was. It took me 13 years to forgive myself for that. Because it took her innocence for my life. Even though as a young child, I was taken to church and at 11 years old, asked God in my heart. I had strayed so far away. So I see Tamar and I think about my daughter. Yeah. See, when we don't forgive and when we don't let go of those that have hurt us, of those that have wounded us, then we are allowing the enemy to control our lives.
Yes, yes.
Because he's the one that brings the hatred in. He's the one that brings the hurt and tries to keep it there. Yeah. And people are just mean. Yeah. I used to be one of them.
Me too.
Okay?
Me too.
I used to be one of them.
Yes, man, I used to be.
But you know what?
My God.
If God saved me, he can save anybody. I had the hardest time understanding how God could love me. I had the hardest time because I knew where I had been. Yes. I was guilty. Tamar wasn't guilty. But yet she carried the shame and she carried the sorrow and she carried the pain.
Yes.
Because of what somebody else had done to her. Right. And then she's told to be quiet. She couldn't even talk about it. So she's got all of this bottled up inside. I know how that feels. Because I kept that hatred for this man a long time. For what he did to my child. And I kept the hatred and the anger and the bitterness toward myself for what I hadn't done for my child. So I allowed the enemy to keep me in that bondage. And one day the Lord spoke to me and he said, how much longer are you going to allow him to lead you in that dance? I said, no more, God. But guess what? That was the day that I forgave myself. That was the day that I forgave the man that raped my daughter. And I have prayed for this man. I don't know where he is. I do know his first name, so I call him by his name because God knows who he is. If I could go back and do it over, I would tell on him just so he couldn't do it to somebody else.
Yes.
Because that's part of what I lived with. Who else has he done this to? Sometimes things happen in our lives because of choices we make.
Yes, yes.
Just like David. David had everything. And he sees a woman and wants this woman.
Yeah.
Then she becomes pregnant, and so